Hey everyone, PL Stewart here, and I am back with yet another spontaneous review. This one is going to be, this is a book that's really special to me. Of course, all the books I read and love are special to me. This one has a different sort of significance than even some of the most incredible books that I've ever read. And this book has a special significance because it is part of the Tainted Dominion by KRYSTLE MATAR. So the book I'm going to be talking about today is Legacy of Brick and Bone. This beautiful chonker. KRYSTLE's books, I mean, they are not only TBR destroyers, they're little literal destroyers because when you look at the breadth of these chonkers, it's something to behold. Um, so I'm going to talk about Brick and Bone. That will be form a lot of part of this review, but really and truly, a lot of the review will also be dedicated to speaking about Legacy of the Brightwash, which is book one in Tainted Dominion. So the book that precedes Legacy of Brick and Bone. So, um, this book, Brick and Bone, in this series, is what I believe eventually, whenever it's finished, it will become one of the absolutely most iconic indie science fiction fantasy series of all time. Um, I believe as a standalone, like I said, Brightwash is already in a very short space of time one of the most well recognized and en route to being essentially iconic single science fiction fantasy books in the indie sphere of all time. It is simply outstanding. So right up there with the name your indie sci-fi fantasy book that you think is iconic, or your series. Um, I think that the Tainted Dominion and specifically Legacy of the Brightwash and anything that comes with this series, yeah, their signal works in the field. And think of your sort of Kaigans, your Threadlight series by Zach Argyle, name your fantasy series, Paternus, Dirk Ashton, Legacy the Brightwash is right up there with all those with the any book in those series, and I believe the series itself is going to transcend some of the best indie science fiction and fantasy books out there. It is just, yeah, KRYSTLE as an author is just that good. The two books she's written so far are just that good. I do have to start off though with Legacy the Brightwash, and because this book, of course, is where things began. For me, Legacy of Brightwash was my book of the year in indie fantasy for 2021. It was a book that it truly, truly, truly made an impact on me. I can't be effusive enough about the praise that I have for this book. I've read a lot of outstanding books in my lifetime, but this transcends like a great read. This Legacy of Brightwash is one of my personal top 100 books of all time. So let's put that in perspective. Most of the overall top 100 books of all time, they are written by long dead luminaries. Thankfully, KRYSTLE MATAR is very much young and alive, and I wish her a long life and continued brilliance. But I need another 50 books from her to come close to being satisfied with how much I want to read from KRYSTLE MATAR. Now, this book and this series, I have to say, it's hard to classify. This is, I believe the author classifies it as Gaslamp fantasy. And I'm sure she would add that there's many other elements. For me, yeah. So Gaslamp fantasy, military fantasy, steampunk fantasy, romantic fantasy. At so many points, it feels like a pure romance novel. Social commentary, really compelling themes. I mean, this is this book and this series, these two books, Legacy of the Brightwash and Legacy of the Bone, they have so many subgenres seemingly woven into, what you can't classify it as a straight up fantasy. That's, I think, what I'm trying to get to in a nutshell. Um, and in a nutshell, you could also say that at its heart, like the Whitewash is somewhat of a whodunit, a murder mystery. Now, and that's where this series, germinates outwards from, and that is so much of what makes this book, Legacy of Brightwash, Legacy of Brick and Bone, the follow up, and the whole series so compelling. So, at the heart of this, the book's main character is a man named Tashwe. He gets the bulk of the POV time in Legacy of Brightwash, and a substantive bit in Legacy of Brick and Bone, but there's more POVs in that, and I'll get to that later. He's a decorated military veteran and a hero, and essentially he's a police officer in the world of the Dominion universe that Crystal has, and he works for a service or an entity called the Authority. So Tashwe, he's very seasoned. He's highly well respected. He's a law enforcement supervisory level officer. He's got about 2 decades experience. So let me explain what the Authority is. It is essentially like a police probation parole type service, and it's been created to control those in society who are blessed with magical or cursed, blessed or cursed, depending on how you look at it, with magical powers. So the dichotomy and the irony of being blessed versus cursed, like that viewpoint, it's not to be lost on the reader that you have these people who are called either talented, so you think about blessed, or tainted, you think about cursed. And Tashui is someone who has latent abilities, these latent abilities as well, as do many people, but some of them don't always come to full fruition in terms of their magical powers. So remember, Tashui also has these latent abilities, as many people do, and he is tasked with, he essentially has to keep these people, let's call them the tainted for sake of argument, versus talented, because of how most of the world looks at them in Crystal's books. Tashui is tasked to keeping these tainted from having their powers wreak havoc, like become unfettered, right? And he has working for the Authority. He has a caseload assigned to him of tainted people. So this is where the kind of the probation role, kind of angle comes in. So the tainted who can comply with the rules that society imposes on them, they get various sanctions or punishments. And the most severe punishment is that they can be sent to the Rift, which is a horrible, essentially a prison for tainted that have disobeyed the rules. And Tashui is responsible for, if he feels that the tainted person has breached the rules sufficiently, they can be sent there to the Rift. Now, the Rift it's brutal. Prison systems are typically not pleasant. This is an extremely brutal, inhumane, repressive place. The people who go to the Rift, they have a very short life expectancy, because either the powers that run the Rift, the authorities, or the other inmates usually kill whoever gets imprisoned there. So just to add another angle to this, and to make this plot in Legacy of Brightwash really crazy, Tashue's son is also a Rift prisoner because he's unwilling to register his talent. So any of the tainted or the talented, they have to essentially register their talent with the state, and of course the Authority that Tashe works for. That's the service with which that's done. So this essential cop, his son has definitely run afoul of the law, and is in a place that would likely get him killed. So we can imagine how Tashe feels about all that. So besides like agonizing about his son and his safety and his well-being, Tashui's life is a hot mess. Okay, he's so he's starting to develop feelings for one of the tainted that he's supervising, and he's got like a fatherly attachment to the daughter of that tainted person that he has these feelings for. In addition, he's got this rather ambitious and very alluring socialite in his orbit that has plans for Tashué, both romantically and politically. And there's other forces that are and some of them are legitimate and some are not very good. That regardless of how noble they are or not, they want to use Tashué for their own purposes because he is very powerful, or respected, popular in the segments where they feel that would be valuable or useful to them in terms of influencing certain things. And as much as Tashué, this is important to note, as much as Tashué, he inspires loyalty and devotion from the other authority officers that work beside him, beneath him. He also has some disloyal ones that can cause real problems for him. So what happens is what Tashué goes through in this book is it is so gut wrenching, and on many levels. We talked about his son being, in a very bad place, and what father wouldn't be upset about that, and uh, so what complicates things though the most for Tashué in a way, and what starts the whole that pulls on the big threads of the plot for Legacy of the Brightwash is that a mutilated child is found, murdered. And this case isn't in Tashué's jurisdiction, but and a lot of people seem in the society seem very unconcerned about this. It's just whatever. But he becomes, some would say, obsessed in solving the murder of this child. Understandably, as a law enforcement officer, I can say unequivocally that law enforcement officers deal with a lot of horrible things, and of all the horrible things they deal with and all the things that I believe they take personally, I think for obvious reasons, is when it involves children, crimes and abuse and hurt against children. That's something that law enforcement officers typically, it gets personal for them. And I can say that from experience that that is why Tashué just can't let go of this. So, anyways, that's essentially the plot of Legacy of the Brightwash. Without giving away a lot of spoilers, I don't want to spoil this book. I want to encourage you to just read it because it is so phenomenal. But let's talk about Tashué. And I talked about why this book is so incredible for me, why it surpasses so many other books. Characterization is one of KRYSTLE Matar's. I mean, she is absolutely stellar. She's one of the best indie authors at characterization I've ever read. And for me, Tashué is that character that he's unforgettable. I will never forget Tashué. That character struck chords with me on personal levels that even I haven't fully, even now after reading the book a couple years ago now, I haven't even fully completely assessed. But I think Tashué is going to go down in the annals of fantasy fiction as one of the greatest characters ever. And I say that with all sincerity. I'm not trying to engage with her in the exaggeration in that. Yeah, Tashué for me, and this is for me personally, but I also think that it will become more of a widespread opinion. He will go down there with Sandan Glokta from First Law and all like some of the best characters in fantasy fiction. So now Matar's made Tashué into this. I said he's a hot mess. He's brave. He's a great leader. He's smart. He's tough. He's passionate. He's very charismatic. He's dedicated. He has a certain heart and integrity, but he's also very flawed and he's very imperfect. But at his core, he's good. And part of why I think a lot of people will love this character is that it's not easy to do what he decides to do. It's not easy to take on the system when you're part of the system, and having to re-examine all the principles you believed to be right and just, and then see the injustice, and then decide to do something about it. Um, you know, that involves a kind of courage that is, beyond just, there's different kinds of courage, and that's a special kind of courage. So speaking about the other characters besides Tashway, they're all again incredibly well drawn, incredibly authentic. They range from ones who are they're brave to like Tashway, or they're cunning, or they're predatory. A lot of them are even depraved, and some of them are horrible, but some of them are wonderful. And there's a lot of them are broken inside. Some are spoiled or arrogant, or but they're compelling. That's the word I would use for them. And you even have good characters, essentially good characters at the core, who espouse narrow-minded or even racist views. And there's bad characters that, on the other hand, they show this nobility and a fairness that will surprise people. So there's not a lot of officers that can write characters so believably the way um, you know KRYSTLE MATAR can, and that is the strength, the ultimate strength, and the thing that about this book that sets it apart from others. It's a skill with which KRYSTLE MATAR writes her characters. I think that anybody who loves this book, and for a lot of people who love this book, they too put this up in their upper echelon, top shelf of books of all time. Um, that is why it is the characters, and it's specifically Tashway. All the characters are amazing, but Tashway is just unforgettable. So I'm not going to talk too much more about Legacy of the Brightwash. I do want, I say this needs to be on your TBR somewhere if you like indie fantasy near the top. It's got everything besides great characters. There's hard something gun bottles. There's MMA style fights, bar fights. There's murders. There's political intrigue. There's backstabbing, explosion chases. But I also want to say that while all that action, really meaty stuff is there, it's a slow burn book, and it's a chunker. It's big. It is 800 pages, something like that. This book, no, not quite that big. 650 pages, and I mean, it is a lot of it. Big part of this is a slow burn romance, and I love that. But again, that may not be for everyone. This is also a book in a series where this is, love means love. You'll see a lot of characters that are queer. You'll have queer relationships, and that's fantastic. The representation, diversity in this book and this series is amazing. A lot of the characters are bisexual, polyamorous. Like you have everything, and it's awesome. Yeah, the romance for a lot of people read it for the romance. So don't get me wrong. So that that is again, there's so many reasons to love this book, but I'm going to say it one more time. I go back to Tashway quickly, and I can't leave that alone. Maybe it's best to talk about why, on a personal level, this really affects me. I think so much of it is because it's the aspect of a law enforcement officer, and I talked a bit about this just now, but let me just get to the heart of it. A law enforcement officer having to examine the laws they have to enforce, face whether those laws are just or not, and whether those laws could potentially be a detriment. Not that they aren't designed for good intentions, or or even some of them may be just, but and even though it can be a stabilizing force for good, how do you reconcile you have a sworn duty with your morals, right? The law isn't about your morals necessarily. The law is about the law. And I know a lot of law enforcement officers have really struggled with this issue, and tried to do their duty the best of their ability, but they still face challenges. But now let's look at someone like Tashway, who on top of everything else, now you have your child who is essentially wound up on the wrong side of the law, the other side. And I can say that what that can do to someone is create a sense of failure as a law enforcement officer, because you would have felt that you, of all people, should have a child that's on the right side of the law, whatever that means. And it can create a sense of shame, and that you failed as a parent. You failed your child. You failed to live up to the expectations of someone in your position. It's and that is something that, um, with Tashaway, I really found really connecting me with this character and affecting me. And I could feel his sense of rage and impotence and guilt and frustration about his son and the system that locks up his son. Um, and in this case, you get the sense his son was wrongfully locked up, despite the best of intentions, and that things have gone horribly wrong, and that the son who's imprisoned is showing a greater moral courage and fiber, that he refuses to compromise. In a lot of people would say that he's showing that courage when Tashaway initially is not. Um, so you can imagine the emotions it brought out in someone like me, who is a law enforcement officer, by day or by trade, whatever you want to say, and that being an author is the part time gig. Yeah, it really did affect me. I will not say I did not shed a lot of tears reading this book. And this book, along with that, Legacy of the Brightwash, these are some heavy themes I've talked about with this book. I told you, Tashway's investigating child murder. There's themes of torture here, child mutilation, abuse, addiction, racism. I talked about repression. So this book is going to make you feel a lot of things, and you're going to hurt, and you're going to hurt a lot. But there will be a catharsis experience, and this, I cannot think of many more worthwhile books than this, in terms of going through that journey of pain. So I think again, this book is one of my favorite books of all time, in the top 100. It deserves to be read, and you should go read it. And that's your gateway to the series. Now, Legacy of Brick and Mortar, the follow-up. It was spectacular, and I don't want anyone to ever think that this was any less amazing than Legacy of Brightwash. I just believe that, for me, I don't think Crystal may certainly exceed Legacy of the Brightwash in the future. I'm not saying she didn't hear, because I think in many ways this book was even better. It's just, for me personally, Legacy of the Brightwash, I mean, it's a book I'll never stop thinking about. It is, in that upper echelon. This will be here too, but Legacy of the Brightwash for me right now is again, that's the cat's meow. So in this book, again, I can't give away too many spoilers. I don't want to. I really want you to go out and read Legacy of the Brightwash if you think it might be your bag. This book goes into, it continues, picks up with the characters where they left off. It's not. I was expecting, frankly, more romantic entanglements in this book, and not that there isn't. We don't have the main central romance as much. You get plenty of vibes like that, but it's there's a lot of heat, and there's a lot of sexy time, and it's great. It's really well done. Crystal writes fabulous scenes like that, but you don't have that central abiding romance as you do in Legacy of the Brightwash. So, what I really loved about Legacy of Brick and Bone was that this is in this book that I really felt, this is a bleak world, but Crystal does something to make you understand it's not the bleakest of the bleak, and that, while nobody is safe from this world and they have to go through these horrible things, and there's the essentially I talked about the hate and mistrust of people with talent, the tainted they call them, and it's basically a form of racism, and that children especially are used, they're just used horribly in this book. They're seen as very expendable. um, there's I think that Legacy of Brick and Bone really, for me, was a sharper in terms of its critiques about the societal issues. And in a society where children are used, they're just disposable, and they're like an economic benefit, they're an economic commodity. Um, that and people overall are seen like that. That's a very problematic society, but it's also a commentary in our real world, in our real situations about things like consumerism and capitalism, and child labor, and all sorts of things. And I felt, for whatever reasons, for me, Brick and Bone really did it. Crystal did an outstanding, absolutely phenomenal job of bringing those themes out. So that's why this book especially really, really hit home with me, in a different way from Legacy of the Brightwash. Um, so the characters in this book, Brick and Bone, we get introduced to a lot of new ones. They're great. I think some of the characters really made an impact. I feel like some of the villains made an impact. You had General Bothane, who's this Machiavellian, character that really, really like stole the show in terms of being a baddie. Um, you know, um, yeah, this book was really well done. You still have Tashaway as the beating heart. He gets, in some ways, less airtime than he does in the first book. Jason is a major character. His son Orza. Oh, there you go, Orza. He was one of my favorite POV characters. He's this protector of the tainted, and he has escaped the worst that the society has done to the tainted, and now he's vowed to protect them, and I think that's fantastic. Lauren is Lauren's a great character. Oh, what a hot, nice Lauren is. Um, he's a fantastic character. I'm not gonna speak too much about the other characters, other than that you will find them so interesting. Davik, there's so many great characters. Elia, but in any case, I'm gonna wind up here soon. But I just want to say that this this series, Tainted Dominion, these books, Brick and Bone, Legacy of the Brightwash, these are books that I can never regret reading. These are books that I think, if you are a fan of extremely compelling, well drawn out, and utterly believable characters with all their faults and complexities, these are the books you should read if you are willing to go through the pain that the author puts her characters through, and it is so well done that you will love seeing the other side, the joys they experience, the bits of happiness that they cling to. You will truly enjoy the ride. It's going to be tough, and it will make you cry. It made me cry, but I think it's something really worth reading. So that's essentially my review of not only Legacy of Brick and Bone. I probably spent more time on Legacy of the Brightwash, but also a series overview of Tainted Dominion by KRYSTLE Matar. I believe this is a series you need to read, and that Legacy of the Brightwash will probably wind up on your top 10 or 20 books, period, because it's that good as an indie science fiction and fantasy book. And yeah, just go read it, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. These are long books, but it's certainly, again, worth the journey. All right. So once again, thanks for listening, and I will speak to you soon. Have a good night. Bye bye now.